Hi, welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we are definitely excited to have Paige Watson joining us. Got some excellent topics and experiences lined up to share about on kind of being accidentally fast, team learning and growth, and interviewing to build a team. So before jumping into that, Paige, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So I've been a developer, boy, it seems like forever now, but probably close to 3 decades. My first computer was an Atari 400, and I had that basic ROM cartridge, and I thought it was the best thing ever. Um, I've been a technical coach. I am currently a technical coach. I work for Industrial Logic, and I've been a technical coach for a couple of years now, although I've sort of always been in that coaching role as a senior lead type developer person as well. Um, I'm gonna be really passionate about good quality practices, good tends to be XP practices, but I don't know the best way to build software. I know the best way right now.
Fantastic, fantastic. Right there with you. And yeah, I love the quality practices as well. And yeah, I'm really excited about your first topic with fast agile and reteaming and self-selection and kind of you're mentioning before that you've been on several teams that kind of have experimented into fast like things. And I know for us, we have not not like following fast by the book, so to speak, but have had several experiments in that vein. And so really excited to hear your experiences and ask some follow-up questions. But maybe for those who don't know what it is yet, maybe share what is fast and what's been your experiences.
Yeah, so Fast Agile is a framework, stands for Fluid Scaling Technology. It's a framework where we organize around work. We organize instead of having lots of small teams that are feature based. Instead, we organize one team around the work, and we use a modified open space marketplace. If you're familiar with open space, and we dynamically reteam every iteration, and let the teams self-select their work. So basically, very much like open space conference, you have a list of things that the PMs put on the board, or in the stuff they'd like to see get worked on. You have people that step up and take the item that they want to work on, and they say, I'm going to work on this item, and I'm going to be in team room number 1. And they put it in, I speak when we were in person, but even now we do use like a mural or Miro, right? They put a sticky on the board that says, I'm going to be in team 1, and here's the work I'm going to be doing. And I need somebody that knows databases and somebody that knows security if somebody wants to join me. And we fill up our work in progress slots, and then everybody else gets a chance to put their name on where they want to go, and off we go. We basically create smaller teams around that work, and go forth and do the work. So that's the basic overview of FAST, right?
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I have some specific follow-up questions because I've heard some experiments recently ran, and but I guess maybe it says you've done this on several teams. Yeah, so what's that been like for you, and what's been your personal experience with it?
So I love it. It's a little bit of a learning curve to go from showing up at work and having someone hand you your assignment to the point of, here's the work that needs to be done, who's going to work on it, right? So that's been a practice and a learning curve. But when you get there, it's super empowering. It's really it creates a like a team responsibility, a team ownership of work, and honestly, things move faster, right? I've been on several teams, obviously the one at Premier Blue Cross where we actually sort of came up with FAST. It wasn't really called FAST at the time, but we were, Ron Cortell, who you've had on, uh, was there, and he had this idea, and we kind of did experiments around it and came up with what he is calling fluid scaling technology now. And I've been at other companies, and without necessarily telling them like we should do fast agile, or like this is the framework, whatever, but instead saying, what do you want to do? How do we want to work? Do we want to get a list of our work assigned to us? Do we want to work on the top level? Well, obviously you always work on the highest priority thing that the application doesn't do right now. But how do we want to select that work? We as developers, we know how to write code. We know how to make good software. We know how to choose what needs to come next, and we can be responsible for that. So do we want to try self-selecting our work and talk to our PM and just have them give us a list of like, here are the things I'd like to see that are the priority, right? How do we want to choose who's going to work on what item? Right. We've tried, giving it to the people that want to do it. That's a really great way. Actually, that would be the best way in my mind, because even if that person doesn't have all the requisite knowledge, they have the want to do it. They have the, they're excited about it. They're choosing to do it. And so around that, since we usually mob work, on our code, we have one person that's saying, I want to work on this. And there'll be, who else wants to join me? Right. It's one of those things that the more we ask, the more we experiment, the more we try and find the right way to do software development, we're kind of coming to that one point, which turns out is very close to FaST, right? And there are some meetings that we have in FaST, some things that we have in FaST that we didn't always do in these other companies, but we worked in short iterations. Do you want to work in 2-week iterations? Do you want to work in 3 weeks? What about if we worked in 2-day iterations? In fact, one of the teams I was just with was working basically in 1-day iterations. And the reason is because we didn't have all this overhead of meetings and planning and, all that extra stuff. What we did is we showed up in the morning and someone said, what are we going to work on today? And another person would take, and I'm going to work in this room on this thing. And I need a couple people that know, security and whatever to join me. And they would go do it. And then the next day they come in and say, here's what we got done. Here's the value that we added. Maybe it wasn't much, maybe it was a lot, maybe it was just learned. We learned something. We learned that we can't use that library we expected to. Okay, so then we go through the whole cycle again and decide, what are we going to work on today? People will step up and do that. And it's very interesting to me how these great practices sort of can be used or are used by people who know how to make great software, even without telling them that it's FaST.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that jumps out to me real quick is that the style of coaching you're kind of doing is very similar to what I've seen done, and I'll do it myself. Is, hey, what do you want to do? Here's some options. You know what I mean? And then you try them out, and then you pick one as a team. And then that style of ways, as opposed to let's adopt framework XYZ or buzzword, yada, yada, yada.
Right. Well, frameworks and buzzwords and whatnot, those are great, but you can't just say, do this and it's going to work.
Right.
Yeah. You have to say, what's going to work for us. And you can take, there's some good parts of Scrum, and there's some good parts of other FaST, and there's some good parts of Kanban. And let's take little bits that we like and think will make our process better, and let's use those. And if they make our process better, then we'll keep using those, and then we'll find something else. Right? You really have to do that, or else usually it doesn't work. Right? I had a blog post just recently where basically the concept is nobody wants to be told what to do, right?
Yeah.
We know our job. Our job is developers. Our job is software creators. We know how to do that. Don't tell me how to do it. Just tell me what you want, and let me do it the best way I know how.
So, oh, go ahead.
I say that's the same sort of thing. Is that
Yeah.
that you can't just apply a framework and say this is you're gonna do this and it's gonna work.
Cool. So I'm sure people are wondering, in your context, do you kind of have the freedom to do this, fully, or is it, is this something that is just decided by the team? Is there leadership support? And I guess what I'm getting at also is, do like is there any sort of like accounting also done around any of this, or is it not recorded, where people work and on what priorities and things like that? Like how are you inverting, I guess, that traditional, like, we need to work on this product this much versus that much?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me start out with the first part, right? I really think that to have a really good, high-performing team, you need to allow that team to basically be who they are, understand who they are, which again, none of this is easy. I'll keep saying that because this is not easy. But the team knows how to make software. The team knows how to work together. But sometimes, if not, they can learn to work together, but you can't impose these. From a leadership standpoint, you have to be a leader who trusts that your team can do this. And that's often a really hard one for management to kind of give up, or product managers or scrum masters or whatever, to say, I'm going to be here to help you. I'm going to clear out all those things that are gating you that I can, but you have to make a decision, and I'm going to trust that you're going to make a decision. I know you're going to make a mistake here and there, but you're going to learn from it, and then you're going to make a better decision, right? And you really have to have that to make any change, right? At work. As for the metrics aspect, right? There are a lot of metrics that you can use, and we didn't. I haven't done estimates in a while. I think that they are not as effective a measurement as we'd like to think they are, to put it very nicely.
Yeah.
But we can do things like put a start and an end date on the work and tell you how long it actually took, and use like Monte Carlo simulations. I know Steve Quo was just on and talked a little about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can get an understanding of how things are flowing by using those Dora metrics type of things.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, one of the things that I ran into, we had a manager who came in and was having a tougher time understanding how we worked, and continually was sort of asking about how do I measure the productivity of each developer in the mob? How do I know that, how do I know that Austin is doing his part? Right. And the answer is, yeah, you ask the team if you really have to know, but is the work getting done? And it's an interesting thing that a team that works collaboratively and works well together will self-correct, right? There have been, if there's a person that's not, right, that needs help, it's not that they're not pulling their weight or whatever. I like to think that we're all doing the best we can at the time we're doing it, right? And maybe this person's got issues that are happening outside of work they're not able to sort of fully be there all the time. And a good team will look at that and say, how do we help? We notice that you're not able to make the mob, or you're always having to leave, or you're not showing up at work, or whatever, as opposed to how much work did you do? You're not doing the same amount of work as all of us, right? Because it's we do what we can. And that's what I love collaborative work. There's so many amazing things about that. But that's one of them, is that we become a team. It's not a I have to do X amount of work and you have to match it. And, so how do you measure? I don't know. And I think that's one of the things, if you look at the FaST guide, one of the things that's not really addressed, because I think it's a new direction, and I don't necessarily have an answer about, because you get into talking about, how do we choose who gets the raise and how much, right? And in a really radical state, I'd say, well, you let the team choose. Yeah. But I don't think that's necessarily gonna happen at most companies.
Yeah. Well, so I think just we align with a lot of what you said. Dora metrics, historic completion rate. I went as far, for working with the rest of the organization and maybe introspection on metrics and things. I've even made a tool that will create a historic Gantt chart using unit test names. So this test took this long to get into the code base. And that satisfied 90% of the inquiries. So I think, just historic, and are we getting things done, and are they moving in the right direction? That sort of stuff works out really well.
Yeah.
So similarly,
I'll add another note on that. And the really interesting thing is that I think when you start to work in a way like FaST, in a way where the teams have a lot of more responsibility and more ownership of not just the code, but the creation of the software, I think it becomes very apparent to the business side that things are getting done, because you're continually shipping, you're continually communicating and coming back and saying, you wanted this blue, but we were having this issue, and maybe this blue would be better, or you wanted to make it talk and we couldn't really do that, and so maybe this, but it like that continuous communication and continuous feedback and responsibility of the team to make the good software. I think once you get into this, it really becomes apparent to the business, and the need for those metrics sort of drop away. They don't always go away totally, but I don't need to know exactly how many story points you're going to do in the next week, because you're continually communicating to me where we're at every moment that I want to know.
Yeah.
And, and I trust you, because we've had that feedback and communication. I trust that when something comes up that it's going to take longer than you thought, you're going to come to me first and say, here's what we're running into.
Yeah.
And you're not just lying because you're lazy developers, right? It's not that, right?
Yeah.
It's a connection that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you're delivering quality stuff, that builds trust and that kind of stuff too. And along with you, what Chris was saying, there's a lot of synergy here. And I guess what I've learned over the years, and this might take us on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant. I'm really curious for your takes on some of this stuff, Paige, because I think in the last 5 years or so, I've been working in a roughly FaST, at least the same kind of priority statements of self-selection and collective working, whether it's mobbing or ensembling, and the ability to choose what you work on and who you work with and things like that. This element of choice has always been a part of it. I guess I've seen several different variations of it, where there's some variations where they're switching every 2 days. And then there's some variations of it where they're switching every couple of years, you know what I mean? And that kind of thing as well. And I think one thing that's kind of come up, and I had some notes here on it, was I've had this hypothesis. It's kind of come up with what makes a healthy mob, right?
Mhm.
And I think, or maybe a healthy mob, a healthy team, healthy ensemble. And I've noticed that things can go south if there's not a few key elements in there. And I guess when it's completely self-selected, how does that happen? Right? You know,
Mhm.
so like you mentioned before, certain technical skills, or even reliability and punctuality, you know what I mean, or competence and whatever we're working on, you know, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Have you ever seen it where the self-selection doesn't land with the team who can get the work done, basically?
No.
Good.
I mean, really, that's the simple answer.
Nice. Okay.
The long answer actually
Mhm.
comes because I think there's a lot of things you have to do before that. Before
Okay.
you can't just say, okay, tomorrow we're going to start self-selecting our work and then we're going to dynamically reteam and go, right? You
Okay.
have to become a team.
Mhm.
And I think you have to do things like chartering and team agreements. We agree that, I know we're a long way away and we're online, but we're going to put this up and we're going to agree to certain working ways of working and things that we do because we all are responsible for the work. And, we're going to show up we're going to be online between 10 and 3 every day. We're going to have a Zoom room open, and we're going to have cameras on the entire time, with exceptions, right? We're all adults. You don't have to be online, but it's like we're going to try and have cameras on because we need that feedback of when we're talking to everybody. We need the
Mhm.
facial expressions. I need to know that you're not, you're actually there and listening. We're going to accept that everybody can't be there all the time, and that's okay, but we're not going to disappear,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We're going to, like, there's a lot of things like this. We're gonna
Mhm.
work on yes and, right? If there's a disagreement, that's great. Let's try yes and. Yes, you believe that, and I believe this, or like, you have to have some sort of way of resolving conflict. And
Mm.
conflict is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Conflict can get us to great places, and it doesn't have to be a butting of heads or I'm angry at you and I never want to work with you type of thing.
Mhm.
If you look at the conflict of why do you think we should design it that way and use that library? I've never used that. I've always used this library and it's worked really well.
Mhm.
Right? How do we resolve that?
Yeah.
Right? And you have to build that team and come to these agreements. That's a really important part first. before you even say, okay, go do stuff, you know because it requires it might sound flippant, but we used to say it requires you to be adult, right? Right.
Yeah.
And now I sometimes look back and like, maybe that's not the best way of saying it. It requires you to be responsible to yourself and to the team and to the company.
Mm.
And honestly, just like mobbing, ensemble, collaborative work, it's not for everybody.
Mm.
Dynamic reteaming and self-selection and all that stuff, it's not for everybody. There are a lot of amazing developers who want to show up in the morning and get their work and type their code and commit it, or whatever, and then go home in the evening. Awesome. Those people are fabulous, right? And that's why I kind of feel weird about saying adulting, because they're adults also. But this kind of working might not be for them, and that's okay, right? It works for me, works for a lot of people, and you know what? that's awesome. But there are things you have to do first. You have to have a safety, a psychological safety on the team of being able to say, I don't know, or making mistakes, and not like that whole blameless post-mortem type of thing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's maybe what I'm getting at is I've seen these FaST self-selection dynamic routine things work really, really well often. I've also seen times where it struggles more, and it might be because of what you just mentioned, right? Is there someone who knows who's in that team, whether in the team or, you know, like a back of the room coach kind of thing, teaching psychological safety and how to have healthy conflict? Or, you know, imagine a self-selected team that has no XP skills or very low XP skills, you know. Those kind of scenarios are, you know, and so I guess I'm wondering, does FaST always come with some sort of coach role who's helping to fill the gaps of those kind of things? Or if a team, let's just say it's a team of 3 people and none of them believe in refactoring unit tests and whatever, is the quality going to be low, and that's okay? Or, you know, or
Well, yeah, the answer is that yes, the quality will be low, and I think that doesn't matter whether you're doing some sort of fast agile type of practice or whatnot. But and I think so. Fast agile, one of the sort of components of it is quality practices, quality software development. But you know, there's a very basic core, and that's the using the open space marketplace to dynamically reteam and self-select the work. You don't have to have everything else, right? And in fact, James Shore he has a great talk online where he talks about his experience implementing FaST at a company, and they didn't work collaboratively. They were still maybe, I don't know if they were, I don't believe they were mobbing. They were dynamically reteaming, but I think they were still kind of doing the solo work. I think now that I say that out loud, it's I'm going to be wrong, I think, but I don't think you have to necessarily do that. But I think it's helpful, and you know, I think that all those, the XP and the great quality practices, you don't have to do those. But again, you're only getting better at one part of the process if you're, you know, like I go on and on about the whole, if you don't have good tests, you can't have a great CI/CD system, you can't release regularly, you know, or quickly, and you can't you know, you can't pivot on a dime, and you know, your code becomes fragile and all that stuff. But it's not necessarily a prerequisite. And then, do you need a coach? Well, as a technical coach, the answer is yes, right? You always need a coach. I think, you know, I don't think we learn without someone who can help us, right? And that, like, I guess when we were doing FaST originally, when we were kind of coming up with it, Ron Cortell was kind of that coach person, but we had a guild, FaST guild, a process guild, where we would meet and talk about, what are we doing? What, you know, is this the right thing? Is there an experiment we want to try? And it wasn't one person saying, oh, you guys should do this, you should try that. It was an emergence of everybody that showed up. Anybody that wanted to show up could, right? And talk about, what do we want to try? How do we want to get better? Right. So I think it certainly helps. Right. You know, and I'm going to touch on what Steve Quo was saying in his deliberate practice. Like, I think you can learn, and you can learn by doing. It just takes a much longer time, right? Could be months to years longer, right? It's a lot harder to learn by doing, to learn to do great practices without someone who knows about them. It's sort of that idea of, if I don't know that this exists, if I didn't know that you could do this, how am I I'm gonna have to figure it out on my own. And
Yeah.
and it might take me a month, it might take me 16 years, or I might never get there. Right. So the positive aspect of having someone in that coach role is that they can see from a little higher level, they can point out things that they have experience with, and they can kind of help you move to what, at least suggest what you might try.
If a team becomes large enough, right, then there needs to be some sort of baselining happening. Otherwise, because I have seen that where, so we generally have if you're not learning and you're not contributing, go to a different mob.
Yep.
Very similar to the open space rules, and we've been doing that for years. And I think we've seen in the past that sometimes that becomes what do the people want to learn, and there'll be a diverse skill set, and that diverse skill set sometimes there is conflict, like and some in some level you get some of that filtered out in interview processes, or if you absorb another team, then maybe that other team has different philosophies and you have to reconcile that. So I do like the yes and idea. But also I think just working agreements in general, are we as a team going to do unit tests or not? And then having some sort of accountability around that. But that's appropriate. I don't think that it is kind of go where the passion is and work on the thing that you want to, but it's not a dichotomy between whether or not you have like stable working agreements, and do you create team-wide working agreements versus department-wide versus company-wide. It is going to be something like federal government and states, I think, is an analogy that I've heard before. So there do need to be federal laws on some level. So that sort of thing. It's hard though, because I have seen it go off the way. I have seen mobbing done in a self-selected way that potentially drove the code base into the ground from a quality standpoint. So there is working agreements and baselining, I think, are maybe key aspects.
Yeah. And one thing that Austin, I think, touched on earlier was that whole idea of like, how do you make sure the right people get on the right team, or I've got work and it's database work, but that the person that really knows the database really well wants to go work on that other, in that other group. And along with that, the question I always get when I talk about this, at a conference or whatnot is, what about the shit work? What about that thing that, what about that story that nobody wants to do? That's, copy this text file line by line into, the JSON file, because we have to move the data, right? Nobody wants to do that. That's dumb. And, there's more shiny, exciting stuff over there. And the answer is that usually it sticks around for, a cycle or two. And if you're going in very short cycles, like in FaST, we kind of recommend 2-day cycles, value cycles. But like, okay, so if nobody picks it up for a cycle or two, that's 4 days. Eventually someone on the team goes, gosh, this has been in there, this has been up there for a while, I'm gonna do it, and I really need somebody that would just hang out with me and we can do this together. And then we'll get back to the fun stuff, right? It's again back to that team ownership and team responsibility for the work. The same sort of thing happens with the knowledge, right? And obviously when we're collaborating, when we're mobbing or ensembling, that knowledge is being spread around. And well, there's a subject matter expert on the database and I don't know database stuff. If I work with that person, I get to learn a little bit, and I can pick up a little bit of the work until I don't know, and then we can get another person to help out. but we start to spread that knowledge around.
Nice.
Oftentimes what will happen is like, the team will step up and say, look, I'm going to work on this. I really need a person who knows the database stuff. And this is really important. We have to get this done before we can continue to move on in this area. Right. And then the people who really know the database go, fine, I really wanted to work on the shiny new thing, but I'm going to come, I'll do it, and maybe they hang out for the whole value cycle, 2 days. Maybe they hang out for long enough to get you past the hump of the database work, right? Or maybe they stay for longer because they find that it's really important and they feel that sort of responsibility. But how do we make sure the right people are on the right work? Well, we trust the team to put themselves where they need to be. Again, if you're not actively contributing or actively learning, then you go elsewhere where
Nice.
you can actively contribute or actively learn.
Nice. Yeah. And I think I had one more specific question, but maybe first is kind of a hypothesis of kind of this dynamic reteaming, FaST, self-selection kind of mobbing thing going on. Is it's not like anything else. There's no magic bullet, right? It's not like, hey, you follow a few simple FaST self-selection rules and wow, everybody's going to, produce, 20 releases a day with high quality, perfectly refactored unit tested code. You know what I mean? Like, it's more, it kind of reminds me of the principles, the Agile Manifesto, where it's a great way to build projects around motivated individuals and trust them to get the job done. It gives some teeth to what that way may look like, right? And what self-organization may look like, where that talks about good design coming from those self-organizing teams. And so, but it's almost like I've heard Woody say before, he felt compelled to stack the deck in teams and mobs, you know what I mean? To make sure that there's the right mix of people that can self-organize with the right XP skills or what have you, with the interpersonal skills as well. So before I ask my last question, does that sound about right with FaST? Okay, cool.
And it really does. And well, we have the FaST guide, and it lays out all the steps. It is not prescriptive of exactly what you have to do. Right? It's great practices that you can do and will improve your process. But you're right. There is no silver bullet.
Nice. One of my last questions was, have you ever seen it occur where there's a discrepancy in team switching styles or frequency? So for example, something that comes to mind for me is context, right? So I've done kind of similar to the FaST style thing where switching doesn't happen a ton. So like it's on the several months or years cadence, right? Where people switch or self-select or go somewhere else. Or if there is switching, it's like, oh, I went and visited them for a week and I came back and then I was here for 6 months kind of thing. Have you ever seen it where some people on a team kind of have more of that mindset and other people are like, every 5 minutes, just to be totally exaggerating, I want to switch. And there's this discrepancy of like, okay, the person who's staying is re-explaining context to everybody, right? Versus someone who's just kind of bouncing around and, maybe butterflying. Have you ever seen this discrepancy in frequencies, switching styles, or?
I think, when you first start this practice, when you first start allowing your teams to decide what they're going to work on, to decide how they're going to collaborate, and there's a learning time there, right? And that's that, like, oh, okay, that was cool, and I'm going to go try this. With FaST, it's not usually a whenever you want type of thing. It's at the end of each value cycle. So if you're doing 2-day value cycles, then there's kind of an expectancy, is that a word? There's kind of an expectation, thank you, that you're going to stick with that group that you chose. Now, does that always happen? No, but I don't think that I've seen it happen more than just a little bit sort of in the beginning. I don't think that there have been, months into a project where there's one person or more that is still like, oh, I'm going to go work with them. Oh, I'm going to go work with them. And, like disappearing again. The teams become self-regulating. They work as a group. Each person starts to feel a responsibility to the team. And the team, I've seen times when someone on the team will, or the team will talk about something, and hey, gosh, this person's just not showing up. And I noticed they checked in some solo work last night, and I don't know why they would do that. And the team would, like, hey, maybe I could go talk to that person and see what's going on, right? And figure out, how do we, maybe there's something with our process we need to change and affect so that this person can continue to work at their best with us, right? Again, not just saying this is the way we do it, but this is, let's continually evaluate how we work. Let's continually make it better and make sure that everybody is able to work in this way, and everybody is, able to work their best in this way. So I think that almost self-regulates itself, in that it handles itself.
So
yeah.
Maybe this one question. So at the end of the 2-day cycle, had you seen it where people the task was completed?
Yeah.
And then people that were working together initially switched to the people that they were working together with.
Yeah, they pick up a new task and they really
whole
enjoy
different group of
working with
people.
those.
Yeah.
I've seen it both ways where the entire group sort of scatters and goes to other groups where they can be helpful or they can continue to learn. Or they're like, oh, that was great. That was so much fun. Let's do it again. Right. And that same group stays together for the next task. Now but again, that's nice, and that makes it excellent to be on a team like that, because I really enjoy working with the people I like, right? But I don't think that I don't think it ever became like cliquish in that, like, oh, these 4 people are always working as a mob together and they don't want anybody else in their group and they never splitting. I don't recall, looking back, I don't recall ever running into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think they enjoyed it, and usually they stay together because they finished a chunk of work, and the next chunk of work is sort of a follow-on to the previous. We were going to build this API, we made this endpoint, and all we were going to do is return a static user. Now, the next step is we're going to actually get the user from the database and return it. I'm going to stay with this group. We were doing great work. We had a good time. And it's the same basic, next step. And so that will usually hold people onto it, but not so much, what you're getting at.
Okay, well, we're coming up on time here. So Paige, thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything that you wanted to promote or share before we close the show?
I'm always open to talking with people. I'm always willing to have a coffee chat, or just ping me. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and Blue Sky and whatever, Mastodon and all the other ones. I'm very passionate about it, obviously. So I've got another 6 hours of material, so we could just keep going if you want. I do teach mobbing and collaborative programming workshops. I teach a FaST Agile workshop. I'm always open to talk about those as well. And Steve Quo and I run the Seattle Code Crafters meetup. We have great people, and again, awesome. You guys are going to be on here in another month or so, right? I'm excited about that. Everybody's welcome, and it's free, and it's it's a great time. So
Awesome. All right. Well, to our listeners and viewers out there, make sure that if you know somebody that maybe is just struggling with how the team is organized and maybe could be looking for a different way, or maybe something with shock value to them at least, then be sure to share this episode with them. And be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And thanks again, Paige. And we'll see you all next time. Bye,
right,
everybody.
thank you.